Imagine you're standing in the middle of a raging river. The current is strong, the water is pulling you in every direction, and no matter how hard you try to hold on, the force is too powerful. You grab at branches, rocks, anything within reach, but the more you fight, the more exhausted you become. The river doesn't stop. It doesn't care how much you resist. This is exactly how life works. We spend so much time trying to control people, outcomes, and circumstances. But the truth is, control is an illusion. We think if we hold on tightly enough, if we push hard enough, if we manipulate things just right, we can shape the world to fit our desires. But life doesn't work that way. The more we fight to control what is uncontrollable, the more we suffer. Think about it. How many times in your life have you tried to force something to happen? A relationship that you poured everything into even when it was obvious it wasn't working. A job you held on to even though it drained you every single day. A friendship that became one-sided yet you kept trying to prove your worth. We do this because deep down we believe that if we just try harder, if we just do more, we can fix it. But let's be brutally honest. Has this ever truly worked? Or did it just leave you exhausted, frustrated, and filled with resentment? The problem is when we chase control, we create resistance. Resistance leads to pain. The tighter you hold on to something, the more desperate you become. And desperation pushes away the very things you want. Think about a time in your life when you held on to something out of fear. Maybe you stayed in a relationship because you didn't want to be alone. Maybe you stayed in a job because you were afraid of the unknown. Maybe you refused to walk away from a situation because you convinced yourself that leaving meant failure. But was it really failure, or was it simply fear? Fear keeps us in a state of paralysis. It tricks us into believing that if we just maintain control, if we just keep our grip tight, we won't lose what we have. But here's what we don't realize. Sometimes what we're holding on to is the very thing that's keeping us stuck. Let's go deeper. Why do we crave control in the first place? It's simple. Control makes us feel safe. If we can predict the outcome, if we can guarantee security, then we don't have to face uncertainty. And uncertainty terrifies us because uncertainty means risk. It means stepping into the unknown. It means trusting something beyond ourselves. But what if the greatest power doesn't come from control? What if it comes from surrender? Surrender isn't weakness. It's not giving up. It's the realization that life is going to unfold exactly as it's meant to, whether you try to control it or not. It's the understanding that you can give your best effort, you can show up with intention, but at the end of the day, you don't control the outcome. Let's look at nature. A tree doesn't force itself to grow. It doesn't control the wind, the rain, or the seasons. It simply allows itself to grow. It trusts the process. It bends with the storm instead of breaking against it. What would happen if you did the same? What if instead of gripping so tightly, you loosened your hold? What if instead of resisting change, you embraced it? What if instead of trying to control everything, you let go and trusted that life would bring you exactly what you need exactly when you need it? The irony is the moment you stop chasing control is the moment you gain true power. Because real power isn't found in force, it's found in flow. Imagine how different your life would be if you weren't consumed by the need to control. Imagine the freedom of knowing that you don't have to hold on to things that no longer serve you. Imagine waking up every day with a deep sense of peace, because you trust that whatever is meant for you will never require you to beg, to force, or to suffer. The truth is, the more you let go, the more life opens up for you. You start to notice opportunities that you were too blinded by stress to see before. You start attracting people who align with your energy rather than chasing those who don't. You start making decisions from a place of wisdom rather than fear. And suddenly life starts working with you instead of against you. So ask yourself, what are you holding on to right now that is weighing you down? What are you trying to control that is controlling you? What would happen if you just let go? There comes a moment in life when you realize you've been asleep, not in the physical sense, but in a deeper way, trapped in patterns, stuck in cycles, and living out a script that you didn't even write. You think you're making choices, but really you've been reacting. You've been conditioned to believe that if you just try harder, hold on longer, or prove yourself enough, everything will finally fall into place, but then something shifts. Maybe it happens when you lose something you thought you couldn't live without, a relationship, a job, a dream. Maybe it happens when you reach a breaking point, when the weight of holding on becomes too much to bear. Or maybe it happens in a quiet moment, when you look in the mirror and realize you don't even recognize the person staring back at you. That's the moment of awakening. It's the instant you realize that everything you've been gripping so tightly has been an illusion, that the things you were chasing, the validation, the approval, the certainty, were never real sources of power. And in that realization, something inside of you stirs. At first, it's unsettling because awakening isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it feels like destruction. The version of you that was built on fear begins to crumble. The beliefs that kept you small start to dissolve, and the life you thought you wanted no longer fits. This is where most people panic, because we are creatures of habit. We cling to the familiar even when it hurts us. We would rather hold on to what we know than step into the unknown, because the unknown feels terrifying. But here's the truth. Awakening isn't about losing yourself. It's about finally finding yourself. It's about seeing reality for what it is, not what you wish it to be. It's about understanding that you were never meant to live in a state of resistance, constantly forcing, constantly proving, constantly fighting for things that are out of your control. When you let go, something shifts. It's almost as if the fog lifts and suddenly you see clearly for the first time. You start to realize that the people who left were never meant to stay, that the opportunities you lost were making room for something better, that the things you once obsessed over no longer define your worth. And in that moment, you wake up. You wake up to the truth that you don't need to chase love, because the right people will always find you. You don't need to beg for opportunities, because what is meant for you will never require you to betray yourself. You don't need to hold on to pain, because healing begins the moment you release your grip. Awakening isn't about becoming something new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be, before you were conditioned to believe that your worth was tied to external validation, before you learned to shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. And when you wake up, everything changes. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop chasing and start attracting. You stop fearing change and start embracing it. The relationships in your life shift. Some people won't understand the new you, and that's okay. Some people will try to pull you back into the version of yourself that made them comfortable, but when you're truly awake, you no longer need their approval. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself, because you understand something they don't. Detachment isn't about indifference, it's about clarity. It's about knowing that you can love deeply without losing yourself. You can care without clinging. You can give without depleting your own energy. When you wake up, you become aware of the energy you allow into your life. You start to notice the patterns that kept you stuck. You begin to set boundaries, not as a form of punishment, but as an act of self-respect. And for the first time, you realize that your peace is non-negotiable. But here's the challenge. Awakening isn't a one-time event. It's not a single moment of clarity that lasts forever. It's a process. There will be times when you slip back into old habits, when the pull of the familiar tries to lure you back. There will be moments when doubt creeps in, when fear whispers that maybe you made the wrong choice. But once you've woken up, you can't unsee the truth. You can't go back to sleep. You can't pretend you don't know your worth. You can't shrink yourself to fit into places you've outgrown. And that is where true transformation begins. Imagine walking through life carrying a heavy backpack filled with rocks. Each rock represents something you refuse to let go of. Expectations, past hurts, toxic relationships, fear of the unknown. You convince yourself that if you just carry it long enough, you'll eventually reach a place where the weight disappears on its own. But it never does. Instead, you grow tired, You feel drained. You start wondering why life feels like an uphill battle. The truth is, it's not life that's heavy, it's what you're choosing to carry. Detachment is the process of putting down the backpack. It's not about abandoning your responsibilities or becoming indifferent to the world. It's about freeing yourself from the unnecessary weight of attachment to outcomes, people, and circumstances that are beyond your control. It's about reclaiming your energy, your peace, and your sense of inner power. Most people misunderstand detachment. They think it means not caring, but real detachment isn't about apathy, it's about emotional mastery. It's the ability to love, to strive, and to pursue your dreams without being consumed by the fear of loss. It's knowing that you can give your best effort without tying your happiness to the results. Think about the moments in your life when you felt the most free. Chances are those were the times when you weren't desperately clinging to something. Maybe it was a period of your life when you were fully present, when you were pursuing a passion without worrying about what others thought, when you were in a relationship that felt effortless instead of forced. That's the energy of detachment. Detachment doesn't mean you stop loving or caring. In fact, it allows you to love more deeply, because when you're detached, you don't love out of fear, you love out of freedom. You're not holding on to people because you're afraid of losing them. You're choosing to share your energy with them without expecting them to complete you. When you're truly detached, you stop begging for things that aren't meant for you. You stop chasing people who don't value you. You stop trying to force situations to work when they're clearly falling apart. You recognize that some things are meant to flow into your life and some things are meant to leave. And instead of resisting, you allow it all to unfold as it's meant to. This is where real power comes in. Because when you detach, you stop operating from a place of lack. You stop acting as if your happiness, success, or self-worth depend on external factors. You start trusting yourself. You start believing that no matter what happens, you will be okay. Most people live in a constant state of attachment, attaching their worth to their relationships, their career, their achievements. They think, once I get this, then I'll be happy. But attachment is rooted in fear. It's the fear that without this person, without this job, without this validation, you are not enough. And that fear keeps you stuck. Think about someone who constantly seeks approval. They work tirelessly to gain recognition, but no matter how much they achieve, it never feels like enough. That's attachment. They are so fixated on external validation that they've given away their power. Now contrast that with someone who is detached. They still work hard, they still give their best, but their worth isn't dependent on the outcome. If they succeed, great. If they fail, they learn. If people recognize them, wonderful. If not, they don't crumble because they are already whole. Detachment allows you to stay present. When you're not attached to a specific result, you stop living in the future. You stop overanalyzing every little thing. You stop grasping at what was and start embracing what is. This is why people who practice detachment radiate a different kind of energy. They don't chase, and yet they attract. They don't force things to happen, yet opportunities flow to them effortlessly. Why? Because detachment removes desperation, and desperation repels what you truly want. Think about relationships. When you're attached, you overthink every text, you analyze every action, you place your happiness in someone else's hands. But when you're detached, you allow things to unfold naturally. You trust that what is meant for you will stay, and what isn't will leave. You stop chasing love and start being love. This doesn't mean you won't feel emotions, you will, but the difference is emotions won't control you. You'll feel disappointment without being shattered by it. You'll experience setbacks without letting them define you. You'll love deeply without losing yourself in the process. And that's the greatest freedom there is. There comes a moment in life when you realize no one is coming to save you. Not because people don't care, not because the world is against you, but because the only person who can truly transform your life is you. That realization is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it forces you to take full responsibility for your reality. Liberating because it means you are no longer at the mercy of anything or anyone outside of yourself. Self-reliance is not just about financial independence or the ability to survive alone. It's about inner strength, about trusting yourself so deeply that you no longer seek permission to live the life you were meant to live. It's about realizing that every answer you've been looking for has always been within you. From the time we're children, we're conditioned to believe that our sense of worth comes from external sources. Parents, teachers, society, they all shape our perception of ourselves. We learn to seek validation from others. We learn to look to authority figures for direction. We learn to wait for approval before taking action. But what if the greatest power doesn't come from being chosen, validated, or guided by others? What if it comes from realizing that you are your own source of power? Think about a time when you doubted yourself. Maybe you wanted to start something new, a business, a passion project, a new chapter in your life, but instead of moving forward, you hesitated. Why? Because you were waiting for someone to tell you that you were ready. You were waiting for some kind of external confirmation that you were capable. But the people who create extraordinary lives don't wait. They don't seek permission. They don't rely on external forces to validate their dreams. They decide, they act, they trust themselves. The moment you let go of the need for external validation is the moment you reclaim your power. You stop waiting for the right circumstances, the right timing, the right people to believe in you. Instead, you become the source of your own belief. Most people never reach this point because they are too attached to the opinions of others. They fear rejection, they fear judgment, they fear failure. But here's the truth. When you are truly self-reliant, failure doesn't break you. Rejection doesn't define you. Other people's opinions become background noise, not a determining factor in your decisions. Why? Because you trust yourself. When you cultivate self-reliance, you stop looking for something outside of yourself to complete you. You stop believing that happiness is found in another person, in a job, in material success. Instead, you become whole within yourself. You realize that everything you need is already inside you, the strength, the wisdom, the resilience, the creativity. You no longer operate from a place of lack. You no longer live in fear of losing something or someone because you understand that you are enough. And here's the paradox. When you no longer need external validation, when you no longer seek something outside of yourself to complete you, that's when life starts working for you. That's when people respect you. That's when opportunities flow to you effortlessly because you are no longer chasing, you are attracting. Think about the most powerful, influential people in the world. They don't beg for approval. They don't spend their lives explaining themselves. They own their presence. They move with certainty. And that certainty doesn't come from external validation, it comes from within. This is not arrogance. It's not about believing you're better than others. It's about knowing that you are capable, that you don't need to be rescued, that you don't need someone else to define your worth. So ask yourself, where in your life have you been giving your power away? Where have you been waiting for permission? Where have you been relying on someone else to tell you that you are enough? Because the moment you decide to stand in your own power, everything changes.